Hello and good evening and welcome to Gibson's Bookstore Remote. I am very pleased to be welcoming this collection of poets joining us this evening as they present COVID Spring, Granite State Pandemic Poems. This book is available from Gibson's Bookstore and we very happily offer curbside pickup. We ship and we do have limited in-store browsing right now. We are very lucky to have both the poetry editor this evening, Alexandria Peary, who is the current New Hampshire State Poet Laureate and the editor of this book. And we also have with us tonight Kirsty Walker, president of Hobblebush Books, who has published this poems. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Alex, Kirsty, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And Elizabeth, thank you for hosting us again. We are always grateful to Gibson's. I can't remember the last time we launched a book without Gibson's, honestly. So I just want to say that this book kind of came about, and I'll let Alex speak to the writing group aspect, but Alex came to me with this grand idea, I think a few days before April, to celebrate National Poetry Month. And she hosted way more writing groups than I ever thought possible in a short time frame. And then we invited poets to submit their work at the end of the month. And we were overwhelmed with the submissions. I think we had over 100, and they were all high quality and, you know, people just doing different things, trying out new forms, and all ages. I was surprised as well. So it was super hard to narrow down the poets to include because, you know, we only have 54. But what resulted, I believe, is a really important and just a meaningful snapshot of the pandemic in April in New Hampshire, which, you know, everyone had such different experiences and they really come out in these unique ways in each poem. And that's kind of why I was so excited to be a part of it as Hobblebush Books publishing. So yeah, I mean, I was just so glad that Alex came to me with that. So I'm going to let her talk about the writing group aspect a little bit and take it away.
Okay, so I have to say, I'm delighted to be here too, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for arranging it. It's so nice to not do the details of a reading. I have to say, it's been delightful to have to do that. And also, Kirsty, it's been wonderful working with you too on all these projects. So in April, as everybody knows, is National Poetry Month, and my little $1 school notebook. I'm always doing this when I teach too. I teach online. It's like Mr. Rogers. I'm always pulling things out of my room to show them, which I never normally can do. My little $1 dollar store, you know, calendar. April every day had something booked, right? And then of course COVID happened, and it was like a floor got tilted. The month of April, and all the events just dropped to the floor. Except, ironically, take a guess here. One institution did not cancel the month of April. A nursing home. That was a little strange, so I had to tell them that wouldn't work out and we had to rebook. But so I thought to myself, wow, that is so sad. That's so disappointing, you know. But then how to make lemonade out of lemons? And I thought, well, you know, this would be a fantastic opportunity for people to process in real time in poetry what's going on in our state during April and COVID. And it was amazing. People came together in about 30 days. Is that how many days April has? 30 days that we had 8 online workshops on Wednesdays and Saturdays on various topics pertaining to writing poetry. And it wasn't a precondition to get into the anthology or a guarantee, but there were these great meetings. Sometimes 50-something people would show up. It was wonderful. And the people were writing, and then we got this amazing collection of poems, submissions to select from. And I just want to say how I'm so proud and happy of this book, of what everybody accomplished, because there's such a diversity of forms and content. I mean, it covers anything from grief to masks to romance during COVID and a whole assortment of forms. And it's just, I don't know how many people have been emailing me and texting me and saying, what a beautiful book, including Kirsty's cover. This cover, it's hers. I think it's gorgeous. People keep telling me what a beautiful, just perfect cover for this book. So it's been delight, and we can't wait to hear your poems tonight. So thank you so much for being with us. So we're going to start without further ado, and just for the audience, in case you haven't been to another reading before of this book, we've asked every reader to read a poem from the book, which you'll see on the screen to help us navigate going to a reading with this technology, but also to provide a little context about their reading or writing a poetry experience during COVID. And I want to say, Christy, what's the number? Is it $2 from every book goes to the New Hampshire Food Bank?
You're so good. I always forget to say that. Yeah, we are donating $2 from every book sold to the New Hampshire Food Bank, just to try to help out with anyone who's kind of suffering during the pandemic in New Hampshire.
So, if you're an audience member, please consider getting this book, because you'll be supporting a small independent bookstore, a wonderful New Hampshire-based press, and also the New Hampshire Food Bank. It's a win-win-win situation. So without further ado, our first reader is Anna.
Great. Hi, thank you. I'm so glad to be part of this. And I just wanted to say a few things about it. I live in Hollis, the southern part of New Hampshire, and during the early part of the pandemic, I was overwhelmed with a lot of children. I live in a multi-family home that's been in my family for, my son is the 6th generation in the house. So it was a very, very busy time. So I have to say, I really had to sneak my writing in, because I was kind of launched into remote learning and, a lot of people around. So I didn't have quite the solitary experience. I really had to steal away to write. This poem came from an event that was traumatic. I love trees, and living here, we had these old century trees out front, and we had scheduled to, they were really dying, and we needed to take them down because they were around the house. So, but as the pandemic, was declared and got speeding up, it was just a very, very, it felt like we were really doing the wrong thing by taking these trees down. Someone was talking about the wonderful book they were reading about the trees. We've planted new trees since, but this was from that moment. So this poem is called On the Day the Pandemic is Declared. The trucks arrive and take down the century trees out front. Rooted rock maples James and Mary planted when they built this house. Insistent on their destruction, my mother speaks out against ruin, against porous rot, punk wood, limbs that might fall on the children. There is no blessing, no sitting beside the dying. I park in the back, try not to watch from my windows as the canopy is dropped piece by piece. Even the early spring lawn, so pale, seems offended. It takes too long. I pace the kitchen, scramble to keep busy, then run from the house into the flurry and growing disquiet of town. Crowded stores, frantic buying. And now even the air feels different. We have made an untenable mistake. Knowing these old ones could have relayed something arcane and wise. Halfway through the cut, the man said, "You could have fit a body down into the middle of that trunk." And I wish I'd made them leave then, with their orange vests and cigarettes, and lowered myself inside what remained, to listen, to remember, bark, root, and filament. Thank you very much. Thank you.
This is going to be such a treat tonight. That was gorgeous. I
Thank
love
you.
people's poems. It's wonderful, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks for listening.
Wonderful. Our next reader is Joyce.
Hi, and Anna, I can so relate to your tree loss, because we also had 9 trees taken down this past spring, and my heart felt like yours. My poem is started out as a haiku. It's a haibun, which is a Japanese form that was popularized by haiku master Basho in the 17th century in Japan. And as I was part of Alex's workshop and was trying lots of different forms and having an amazing time, I just had to return to something familiar one day, and I wrote a little haiku to do with my COVID experience. But it seemed too short, and I wanted to expand the visual. So I decided I'd turn it into a haibun. And I've just started free writing prose, and based on an experience that I had traveling back and forth to the post office, which, you know, essential workers went back and forth to work. The rest of us went back and forth to the grocery store or to the pharmacy or to the post office to mail masks to people. And sometimes it just felt so restricted, those movements that we were making. So this poem sort of reflects my driving to the post office and seeing the beautiful daffodils along the road in Dunbarton, that in this poem became more than beautiful daffodils. They became a little bit sinister, actually. A COVID haibun. My moist breath fills the space behind my mask. When the person 6 feet ahead of me in the post office line turns, I wave because he can't see my smile. His mask sports Yankee emblems, even though we're deep in Red Sox country. I wonder if he knows anyone in New York City. I search his eyes for fear or sorrow, but his eyelids lower like Roman shades, shutting me out. He turns back, and I only know we both need haircuts. The lobby door opens. A woman with bunnies hopping across her blue flannel mask plants her feet on a yellow line. Did you see the daffodils blooming along the road? Is her muffled question addressed to me? The daffodils lining my route had caused me to smile at first. They were sheltering in place too. But the blossoms became a multitude of trumpets announcing the latest restrictions in between playing taps. The yellow borders hemmed my car in. I felt like Tootle, the Golden Book engine, who tired of chugging along on the tracks, looking at the same scenery day after day. I turn, nod. Hell, they were the only thing that kept me from driving into the field to remember what freedom tastes like. Our paths contained, like rabbit warrens, labyrinth spring. Thank you.
Wow. Next poet, Carla.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I was writing from Meredith, New Hampshire, and this poem, which is a golden shovel, was actually a prompt that I had from an April 30/30 kind of thing that said, write a golden shovel one of the days. And I'd never tried one before. And I think that day I came across a poem by Dorianne Laux called What I Wouldn't Do. And there was a line in the poem called Cleaning houses was fine, polishing the knickknacks of the rich. And the way the golden shovel works is that you would use the last, for the last word of every line, you would use one of the words in that phrase or stanza line from the poem that you're using to base the golden shovel on. And sometimes you could use a few lines too if you wanted. And so that's what I did. Now, I am in Meredith, New Hampshire, and Meredith, it's a funny thing because I'm on the lake, and Lake Quinnipisaukee, you feel everything feels safe in some ways. People feel very isolated on the one hand, and on the other hand, I would go to the marina, and the people there, nobody would wear a mask, and mostly people are outside. They think, okay, we're outside, nobody wears a mask and everything. And also talking about this poem, when I first started to write it, I think I and other people around me were, a little we had a lot of lack of understanding of what was going on with the pandemic, and and so forth. And the only kind of message that we were hearing was, wash your hands and wear masks. And then there was that viral video that came out that told people to wash their vegetables too, and it was kind of crazy. And anyway, this was my response to that feeling about everything. And it's called Cleaning During a Pandemic, What I Wouldn't Do. I'll let you put it up. Great. And the epigraph there is the first line, is the line from What I Wouldn't Do by Dorianne Lux. Cleaning houses was fine, polishing the knickknacks of the rich. Now I feel unfaithful while everyone obsesses about cleaning, wiping down doorknobs, whatever they use to enter houses, maybe spraying the bottoms of their shoes too before they walk in. I was less fastidious about hand washing before. Now, after each touch, I wash to a fine round of the alphabet song, interleaving fingers, scratching palms, polishing thumbs in the cup of my hand. We keep saying we want to get it, the virus, sooner, so we don't clean the faucets before washing or the knickknacks we can no longer donate. Instead, we box them and store with hope for a future, a time of handshaking, hugging, eating out, the giving of goods to other survivors, the more needy, a time we hope is less desperate than rich. Thank you very much.
I think it's just fabulous, the different forms people write in, right? We're seeing such a diversity here. It's really terrific. Our next writer, I think, has also got a really interesting form going, is Heather.
Hi there. And I feel very honored to be here because I don't write poetry, I knit. and so during the lockdown, as the world was kind of seeming to fall away around us, I was busy knitting this cardigan. And it was just full of mistakes. And it really, to me, kind of paralleled what was going on in the rest of the world. So before I start my poem, though, I feel like I need to clarify a few terms for you non-knitters out there. And basically, when you knit a cardigan like this, what you do is you use big, long circular needles and you knit round and round and round and round. You go all the way up to the top, and then you knit down, round and round the sleeves. And then, in order to make it a cardigan, you take all that beautiful work that you just did and you lay it out on the table, and you take a pair of scissors and you steek it, which means you cut right up the center, which is terrifying. There are a few little things that you do to secure the stitches, but after all that work, 3 months worth of work, it's still terrifying. And then, since a knitted object is usually a little bit wonky and bumpy, what you do is you block it. So you lay it down, you wet it, and then you lay it down to dry, and you pin it out and stretch it so that the pattern's nice and crisp and clear, and that can fix a world of mistakes. So without any further ado, I will start my poem, My COVID Cardigan. Knit while my attention wandered from the pattern to the news to the numbers, and oh right, back to the pattern. An unintended pattern develops. Stitches meant to stack neatly, mathematical sequences creating orderly motifs, instead wander as aimlessly as my attention, forming not orderly columns but meandering lines. One line is stopped abruptly by a dropped stitch, another swerves in to fill the gap. Shit, the stitch count is off again. Where did that happen? I create a new stitch to get back on track, forcing neighboring columns to veer off. Wandering attention from the news to the pattern to the numbers, and oh, darn it, the pattern. Too concerned with consuming the news and calculating the latest numbers to go back to fix it, I can't contemplate ripping it back as the world unravels around me. Autopilot with sudden course corrections becomes my norm. Meandering lines are compounded by wavering gauge. My tension rises and then goes slack with despair, leading to a fabric as uneven as any presidential policy tweet. I miss needed needle changes, too tight here, too loose there. I can block it out. Please, can I block it out? Wavering gauge is compounded by wonky stitches, glaring evidence of a determined effort to drill down to fix a major mistake. I still can't contemplate ripping back as the world continues to unravel. I move doggedly onward. It will be okay. It will all block out. Please let me block this all out. And now the knitting is done. I had circled round and round as I knit, from pattern to the news to the numbers, and sometimes back to the pattern, building my sweater row by wonky row, stitch by wobbly stitch. And now it is time to cut the steek. I'm perched on the precipice, scissors poised, and I don't know which is scarier, the news and the numbers, or my scissors poised above my wandering, wavering creation. How can I chart a straight course through this mess? All I can do is take a deep breath, clear my mind of the news and the numbers, and do what I should have done all along. Focus on what is right in front of me. No more wandering, no more wavering. I snip one secured stitch at a time, transforming my tension and my fear, now embodied in my wobbly, wonky knitting, into my cozy COVID cardigan. Thank you.
And might I say, that is a beautiful sweater you're wearing.
Thank you very much.
It really is. Our next reader is Maren.
Well, thank you to all. Alex, for the workshops and for the curating of this, and also for the 3 readings. You know, I got this book and I read it, right? All the poems. And it's only as I listen to these 3 readings and hear them voiced that they take on such deep meaning. And thanks as well to Kirsty for being behind this and giving it not just the beauty and poetry, but to feed people in a time of food insecurity is a wonderful thing. So I am very grateful, and always grateful to Gibson's for support for lots and lots of authors. So this poem that I wrote, I've written a lot of pandemic poetry. Some of it is just awful, and some of it I will read again. But so my day job is that I'm a clergywoman. And clergy are dysfunctional in terms of grieving, because the thing that you do when you lead both religious and civil funerals and memorial services is you are the one who has to be in control. You cannot cry, no matter how deeply you knew the person. You cannot let your voice crack. You cannot do that, because those family and friends are counting on somebody getting them through this event. Somebody is going to make this begin and follow through and end. The result is that around a lot of personal grieving, we're just not very talented. We don't grieve at the right times and in the right ways. And then something happens. We taste a food that somebody loved. We hear a song. We're in the wrong, inappropriate place, and we remember somebody and we just go to pieces. I didn't expect that would happen with the pandemic, which is a sort of a broader kind of grieving. I mean, I have grieved 2 personal losses by death from COVID-19, but sort of the whole pandemic time. And then in April, when I was doing these workshops, I had the experience of putting away all my canvas bags that I couldn't bring to the grocery store anymore because I had to take the plastic bags. So you couldn't bring the canvas bags. We can now, but we couldn't then. And I burst into tears at the sense of all the activist things, all the green things, all the things that I'd done are just being undone by this time. And then had other experiences that were just like these random details that gave me sort of insight into myself and my feelings. So the poem is called Little Things. I fold up the canvas bags I faithfully used to bag my groceries and begin to cry uncontrollably for all the good efforts I've ever made that have been turned around. Then I walk the dog past the cemetery and I think, those stones are standing too close. Now my nose is running into my mask as I begin to remember the people who touched my life from whom I now have so much distance. Joy, too, drives by. When a friend stages a one-car birthday parade, balloons out the sunroof and singing off-key out the windows, and suddenly the balloons stand for every joy I've ever known, the gravestones for all my losses, and changing back to plastic bags for my bread and coffee and potatoes to keep us safe reminds me how many times I have not changed the world. Not yet. But these parables, plucked from the inside out of little things, flatten the curve between my heart and hope.
Susan.
Thank you, Alex, and it's an honor to be here. I think I'm going to read my poem first, and then I will talk about it. It's called Having a Hard Time Hearing You, Cancer During the Coronavirus. I affix the face mask, nose to chin, like a pilot readying for mission. Hand wash while reciting the Lord's Prayer, slowly. In the sink where syringes pile up. Last night's blood draws from my granddaughter. I hazard the trial to get lunch, stealthing down neuro-oncology's white waxed hallways, past the Spider-Man pedal trike and Paw Patrol push cars, sanitized, still, past the charge nurse, a cipher behind her mask, eyeing my passage. I activate the elevator's down arrow with my elbow and descend again alone, alighting on the ground floor where the ad hoc reception table, flanked by masked security men with dreads, funnels any incoming to Boston Children's. At the food court, puffing consonants through my mask, I ask the pizza man about the toppings on this piece of pizza, and he answers through his. I guess at the garbles I can't quite make out and gamble on the slice. The checkout lady berates me, as always, with a mask muffled, "Why don't you use your whole voucher? You have $2.19 left." Or was that, "You have $2.90 left"? I grab a candy bar to appease her, and I have enough to cover it, but how to know? Does it please her? Landing back on the barrens of floor 9, I tuck into Vivi's room, unmask, scrub up, make it through, deliver us from evil. See that my wee girl lies mercifully sleeping, herself a hushed amen. But as I sit to eat, she stirs. Chubby hands clench, tiny mouth yanked open, And oh, those harrowing cries over and over, the wrenching, retching, these clearest human sounds I hear all day, all night, my granddaughter's long suffering. So it was a little bit different for me having the coronavirus because I had been living in the twilight zone since early December. My little granddaughter, who had been born with a rare disorder, genetic disorder. In fact, my daughter says she would have a better chance of winning the lottery twice than having a daughter with MPPH. It's so rare, there are only 64 cases in the world. But she's adorable. She was making great progress until a year ago, just about now, we found out that she had a very aggressive brain cancer. So after brain surgery, she was 1-1. After brain surgery in November, early December, my daughter moved to Boston Children's to be with her daughter. And it was basically an 8-month stint. I think Vivi came home once in May for a couple of days, but otherwise that's where she was. So I jettisoned all of my life, except a course I teach, just cleared the decks to be there for my daughter's family, watching her 4-year-old son a lot, and then giving my daughter a break because it was really hard to be living there the whole time. So I would go down from time to time and spell her. But anyway, writing, I wrote a lot of laments. I wrote a lot of lament psalms, I guess, when I was there, and tried to kind of just canvas what I was feeling. But it was thanks to Alex's workshops that at first I thought, oh, the last thing I want to write about is COVID, because I already had a restricted life and now it was even more restricted. But by the end, I realized, no, I had a story to tell. And being in that workshop gave me the wherewithal to tell that story. So thank you.
May we ask, how is she?
Yeah, she's been home for a couple of months now and progress is slow. Even with a child that age, she has PTSD from what she's been through. So on top of trying to learn all the things that she couldn't learn, she's just struggling with that too.
Thank you for reading that poem. It's very powerful. Very powerful. Thank you. Okay. Next person, actually, she has her husband had an accident. She's not able to be with us tonight. And actually, I'm just realizing something here. Do we have Jennifer Edwards as a participant by accident? Elizabeth, do you see if a Jennifer Edwards is with us as a participant?
I do not see her in our audience.
Okay. Okay, I don't know. Something happened there. Okay, so I guess after that, it's Grace, please. Grace.
Okay, I'm going to wait for the poem to come up and read it off the screen. And I'm expecting it. Oh, I can talk about the poem. Right. So the first poem was about trees. This is about trees. The way I came to write this poem was I read the book, The Overstory by Richard Powers, which I found incredibly powerful. I was reading it as the pandemic began to unfold. And it's a book that's, for those who haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's really about how we're all connected and how we're all connected to trees, and there's a language out there that the whole universe speaks, and we're all one on some levels, like a whole energy system. And so the coronavirus itself, the virus, made sense to me in the context of thinking about the oneness, which is a basic message of this poem. At the same time, I was walking a lot in the woods around my house. I found places in the small mountains around my house I'd never been. I've lived here for almost 40 years. I found an old stone mill. I found trails that were like 50 yards off the trails I always take that I'd never seen before. And I was really deeply affected by the book, the trees, the thought of being in this world that, I mean, the virus itself is part of our world and it's doing devastating things, but we can't separate ourselves from it. It's part of existence. There are viruses out there. So that's where this poem came from. In American Elegy, we go back to not dying. Wherever we fall is the beginning. In a lay of elms planted to create a lace of sunlight and shadow. What separates branches from wind in designing their dance? Nothing. We carry our own seasons, wondering when we will have wept enough. We crave the cheerfulness of a park, the feathered voices of children. We know we are not brave, but ordinary. We hold our breath and listen for our common language, the murmur under the hum. Thanks.
Our next reader is Margaret.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Excellent. So I live in Rochester, New Hampshire. We've only lived here for 4 years. And Rochester is a community that's in the process of revitalizing. And COVID hit that process kind of hard because new businesses that were going to come in, were about to open, couldn't. But there is a really powerful artistic community in Rochester. And so there were some new public art pieces that were put out. And also local restaurants got involved with doing fundraisers for meals for the homeless. They offered the opportunity to buy meals at the restaurants that were then given to the homeless. That was sort of a win-win for the restaurants, win for the homeless, and win for those of us who wanted to be able to do something for our community that was just kind of stuck at this time. The poem that I'm going to read, I did Alex's workshop too, and it was wonderful. And when she talked about writing poems having to do with COVID, I just thought, I can't do that. I just can't do that. And then I realized that everything I was writing had to do with COVID. So the poem that I'm going to read is an angry poem, and it's called Losing Count. What makes this trip so important? The swans are stacked in their shed at the beginning of May. Entice you in. The vice president insists on a face-to-face meeting. The evergreen friends, what they heard here. In Brazil, the numbers keep climbing. A city has cut links to the outside world. Shine a light. What? Watch what legislation is worth. This is the other side of the coin. The jury's done. Are lies ever inconsequential? We decide to go for a walk by this river, looking for a tool, losing count, mistakes we make together. Thank you.
Our next reader is Heather.
Thank you. And it's an honor to be here. And I'd just like to thank Alex and Kirsty for gathering this book together. It's got such amazing writing in it. And I'm not a writer by training. I'm actually a physician. I work at Elliott Hospital in Manchester. And I was, my specialty is pathology, and I was furloughed for 2 months in April and May for half-time. because all of the elective procedures and surgeries had been canceled while they were waiting for a big surge of patients to come in. And so while I was at home more than often, I got to watch firsthand as my daughter, who was a senior in high school this year, I kind of watched her end of senior year fall apart. And I had a lot of trouble coping with watching that happen. And that's how this poem sort of came to be. And really writing is a catharsis for me. And I wrote a number of poems about the pandemic and my experience and my family's experience, my colleagues' experience at work. But this, I think, was one of the things that I struggled with the most. And we actually, my husband lost his aunt to the virus. So we did have some, you know, I guess you would call it bigger losses. But my daughter really seemed to take a lot of it in stride. All of the celebrations that kind of disappeared, while I was the one who was really kind of, I think, struggling with it more than she was. So on to the poem, which is called Class of 2020. This week, I picked up her peach prom dress on the day that would have been the final fitting. This morning, it still hangs in the basement, an open black bag with layers of cascading lace and tulle. Everything that enters the house from outside is a possible source of sickness. So we count down the days in quarantine while we wait out the virus's viability. Yesterday, the governor announced remote school for the rest of the year. And today we learned the prom and senior week celebrations are canceled. Friday is her birthday with no friends or significant other. Almost 18 years ago, she arrived in this world with unseasonable snow a month early. The first day I knew I was pregnant, the Twin Towers fell in New York City, and I worried what kind of world I was bringing a baby into. I'm not sure if the nausea was from the surreal news scenes, the hormones, or the fear. That day, I thought our country lost our collective illusion of being untouchable. This year, we seem to stand on the threshold of that lost lesson once again. Each minute, I watch heartbroken and helpless as her senior year recedes like the sun at day's end. And though it doesn't compare with the greater losses growing by the hour, the sick dying alone with no loved ones, no ungloved human touch, healthcare heroes with sparse shields, tests, and masks, those with no money for food and no work for money. I cannot deny the daily somber weight of all the suffering. And in this moment, our own grief for the loss of a milestone still remains. With tight fists and tears and gratitude, we can still catch our breath and sob. We rise the next morning to a late April snow. Thank you.
Our last reader is Bill.
Hello. First, thank you thank you to Gibson's, Alex and Kirsty, for putting this whole project together. Gibson's for hosting, and Alex and Kirsty for putting the project and the book together. A little background about the poem. From the current vantage point, sometimes it's hard to think back to April. In other ways, it's not, because my feeling as March evolved into April was one of ambivalence. I was concerned that I wasn't taking the situation seriously enough. Then I was concerned I was taking it too seriously. I wanted to get out and be normal, and I hesitated to be normal. One of the things that helped feel like things were a little normal was the reopening of the local bookstore on a pickup basis or mail out basis to Toadstool Bookstore. And as most people that are readers or writers, I love bookstores. So that made me feel like, okay, normalcy might not be too far down the track as we went into April. But then I saw restaurant after restaurant close, and it was just a mix from a dark mood to a light mood and back and forth. So that's kind of the background of this poem, which is also a poem that comes in the middle of about 24 poems I wrote during this period that go from a dark mood to a light mood and back and forth. So the poem is slowly. Slowly I tread, placing one foot after another, gradually picking up the pace of reparticipation in the human race. But I maintain doubt about what this is all about, reluctant to plunge on if staying still would more appropriately fit the current bill. Thank you.
Fabulous job, everybody. Kirsty, what would you think?
I just love these readings, honestly. I mean, I think someone else said it earlier, but there's just something so different about hearing the poems and seeing your faces and hearing the backstories too, which is something you don't always get in the book when you're reading. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thanks to you for putting it together.
Oh, it was honestly one of the biggest pleasures. And especially this year, I think it was probably the best thing I'd done all year. So thank you for all participating.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for hosting.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you to Gibson.
Thanks, Gibsons.
As Kirsty just mentioned, sometimes it's taking the small pleasures that make the big trials easier to bear. So I hope that you found some joy in this evening. This book is available from Gibson's Bookstore, and Hobblebush is donating $2 from every copy sold to benefit the New Hampshire Food Bank. Thank you, everybody who joined us this evening. I hope you stay well and safe in your homes. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Stay well and write well. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.